Hello, and welcome to week 2 of A Pathway to a Positive Special Needs Outcome, a collaboration between Vista Points and Strategic Financial Partners. I'll be your host today. My name is Tyler Page. So now that we know how to fund a special needs trust, let's ask some important questions like, what is a special needs trust? Why do I need a special needs trust? When do I need to get a special needs trust? Darlene Kemp will be answering these questions tonight. Darlene Kemp is the Executive Director of Vista Points, the Special Needs Trust and Resource Center, providing education, advocacy, referrals, and service related to special needs trusts. The company serves as trustee for the Tennessee Pooled Trust First Party Special Needs Trust and Third Party Supplemental Needs Trust. If you have any questions, please press the hand button at the bottom of the screen, and after the presentation is over, I will call on you. Darlene, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler. And first, I want to thank both Tyler Page and Carolyn Fleury of Strategic Financial Partners for partnering with Vista Points. And on the Vista Points side, I'd like to thank Teresa Law and Bill Emmerling for working on this 4-part class and making it as great as it can be. So let's get started here. When you think about special needs trusts, do you think of financial means? Do you think of special needs? Do you think of disabilities? And what is a disability? Is it someone that can't read? Is it somebody that's in a wheelchair? Is it someone that's been injured or has an illness? And what about children? Does that include Down syndrome and autism? There's so many different definitions, but I can tell you that if a person is illiterate, they are not considered disabled. A disability deals with someone of any age that's living with a physical. Tonight, we're going to talk about special needs trusts and how they relate to people living with disabilities. I will define the types of special needs trust and remaining money after the beneficiary, and that's the person living with the disability, passes. And then we'll close and give you time to ask questions. So please, as I'm going through the presentation, please write down your questions and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So what if you had a loved one living with a disability? What if you had a child that was born with cerebral palsy? Or you had a young adult in your family that developed mental illness? What if you had grandparents that were taking care of a Down syndrome child that was now in his 50s? Or what if it's you and maybe you're in your 70s or 80s and you've developed Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis? These are all people that are living with special needs. They have a disability that affects their daily living. Let's talk about infants. Infants and children are so special, and approximately 120,000 babies are affected with birth defects each year. Now, children can develop other illnesses such as the autism and Down syndrome, among other things. Cerebral palsy also stands out in Tennessee and nationally. What can we do to help those kids? Well, tonight I'm going to show you what we can do. There are many times that young adults develop mental illness. In fact, research facility. She sat at her desk all day, and in that facility, the air conditioning system was picking up debris out of an experimental lab and blowing it onto her desk. She could take tape and pick up the granules that were on her desk. Well, not only were these landing on her desk, but she was inhaling them. And she did develop mental illness. She became extremely paranoid and ended up losing her job. Because of this mental illness, she was not able to work anymore, and she had had a vibrant life before this. She did file a lawsuit, and in that lawsuit, she received a settlement, and that settlement was provided to her. It was about $100,000. Now, if she kept that money, she was not going to be able to qualify for the government benefits she needed to care for her day-to-day life and to pay for her health care needs. But that's what she decided to do. She kept that $100,000 and lived very well for 2 years. But what happened after that? We're going to get into these topics, and I'll tell you. We also have seniors. Do you know of anyone that has been scammed? Have they gotten phone calls that say, hey, I'm from Nigeria and I need you to help me with my religious organization or help people that are fleeing from persecution? What about donations? Can you make a donation to help an organization that maybe you haven't heard of? There was a woman that called our office. Her father was a millionaire and lived on a farm all by himself after his wife died. The daughter was in her 60s, but maybe you've been raised this way. No matter how old you are still a child in your parents' eyes. This young lady, the 60-year-old, had power of attorney over her father, but her father told her, you cannot tell me what to do. I am your father. Well, she tried to care for her dad, and he wanted to be left alone, so she did that. A few months went by, and when she went to visit, she was going through her dad's checking account and found that he was writing checks, about $30,000 at a time, to various organizations. And she called the Vista Points office and said, what can I do? My dad is spending money frivolously, and he's not and going to end up with not enough to care for him. I suggested that she talk with an attorney and to set up a special needs trust to move the money into the trust so a third party, not her, could oversee that money and help her dad live a good quality of life. She told me she just couldn't do that because her dad wouldn't allow it. So I told her to call anytime. Well, a year went by. After that year, she called again and she said, my dad has spent over $200,000. From what I found out, people are calling and asking him for money, and they'll talk to him for a long time. I've asked him why he's doing this, and he says he's lonely. What can I do to help him? I told her the same thing again, that she should see an attorney, and I could refer her to an attorney in her area and establish a special needs trust for her father's money. Again, she told me she couldn't do that. Another year went by, and you will not believe what happened. He was down to $34,000. Out of the $1 million that he had in his checking account, he was down to $34,000. He had given all of his money away. At that time, the daughter did step in. She did establish a special needs trust for the remaining $34,000 and helped him qualify for Medicaid to cover his health care needs. He ended up being moved to an assisted living. The farm had to be sold to pay the bills that were outstanding. She found stacks and stacks of bills that had not been paid. She was very distraught over this because she had hoped her and her brother would inherit the farm, but in turn, her father died in the assisted living facility, still waiting for the next call to talk to his so-called friends. Do you consider this a scam? I do. And many times people fall suspect to scams because they are lonely, as this gentleman was. Now, why do people establish special needs trusts? It's for protection. That is the main reason. They want to protect the personal assets they have, which could be money, it could be investments, housing, all sorts of things. Now, when a person has a special needs trust in their name, if they have more than that, the attorney will work with the family and the beneficiary. And remember, that's the person living with a disability or special needs, to find ways to either transfer that to someone else's name, to sell that and put the money in the trust, or there's other means too. The protection provided promotes quality of life for the beneficiary. Now, what is quality of life? That depends on the person. For a child, it could be getting the health care they need, going to a daycare, getting all of the assistive devices, education, training to use their different apparatuses that they have. And I know firsthand from this. As a child, I was crippled with rheumatoid arthritis. At 12, I set a record for the most fluid drained out of my knee for a girl at age 12. Do you think that was a record I wanted to have? I can tell you it was not. But my quality of life was very different as a child compared to other children in our neighborhood. My quality of life was sitting outside with braces on my legs and being able to learn how to catch a bee in my hands. I was quite proud of that. As time went on, my quality of life changed, and now I consider myself, quote, normal. I might not be able to ride a bike, but I can still walk. I might not be able to run, but I can walk pretty fast. I do the things that other people do, but I have to adapt to that. And people with special needs and disabilities also have to adapt. They can have a great quality of life. It just might be different than what's considered normal. Three-way protection, number 2, is protects government benefits. When someone has a disability, they might not have the insurance or money to pay for their healthcare needs or their day-to-day living expenses. By putting the money that they have into a special needs trust, they're able to qualify for the government benefits they need. Also, a trust provides peace of mind for the family. Many families don't know what to do with their loved one, especially if someone has a mental illness. Many times the beneficiary living with a mental illness does not want family to help them. Or maybe the family is fed up and say, this is all we can do. We need to turn this over to someone else. Many times that beneficiary gets along very well with a third party, which is the trustee that holds the money or the assets of the special needs trust. Other times we might have a grandparent. Maybe you know someone that has adopted or become a guardian of their grandchild with special needs. That grandparent starts thinking about what can he or she do to help the grandchild, because they know they're in their 80s, they might have 10 to 20 years left, but that child's still going to be around after they die, and what's going to happen to them. By putting the money in a special needs trust, that child can have protection in a financial means so that the trustee can follow guidelines set up by the grandparent. And those guidelines are called a letter of intent, where the grandparent or parent can list what they'd like that child to do through the course of their lifetime. For example, maybe a family goes to Florida, to Disney World every year. That can still continue after the parents or grandparents die. Maybe the parents wanted their child to get a good education. That can continue too. There's many things that can happen with the use of a special needs trust. And as I said, it can give the family peace of mind knowing their loved ones being cared for. So let's review the 3 types of special needs trusts. There are no more than 3 types of special needs trusts, and so we will go over each type and I will explain in detail. The first is a third party supplemental needs trust. This type of trust is for parents and grandparents. It could be a family member that wants to care for their loved one. It does not have to be a child or a grandchild, but it usually is. A third party supplemental needs trust can be set up for a friend as well. All of the money that goes into this type of trust are gifts. It cannot be any money from the actual beneficiary or that the beneficiary has or owns. All of the money has to be gifts. Now, some people start a GoFundMe account to fund a third party trust for their loved one that's living with a disability. Others have things arranged in their will so that an inheritance can fund a third party trust. Sometimes people say for their other family members, hey, I know you usually spend $50 on my daughter's gift each birthday or Christmas. How about if you only spend 25 and put the other 25 in a third party trust? These are all ways that the trust can be funded, and money can be added anytime. There is no age limit on a third party trust, so no matter how old the person is, a third party trust can be established. Many times, an attorney will use an estate plan and add a third party supplemental needs trust to that so an inheritance can be transferred to the trust. One thing good about a third party trust is that when the beneficiary dies, there is no Medicaid payback. So if the beneficiary has used a lot of money from their Medicaid or TennCare, there is no payback for that. Any money remaining in the trust after administrative fees are paid will go directly to whoever is listed in the agreement. That's called a remainder beneficiary. A first party trust usually deals with young adults who have been injured or involved in an accident. Sometimes it's a workman's compensation case, but the funds usually come from a lawsuit. It doesn't have to come from a lawsuit, but it can. And these people are living with a physical, mental, or intellectual disability. Now, I'll give you an example. We had a young man who was injured while on the job. And in fact, it was from a automobile, not an automobile accident, I'm sorry. It was from a machinery accident. His arms were cut off. He got pulled into the machine. His lawsuit settlement was going to give him $300,000 for losing both of his arms. He was not going to be able to work in his job again. So he did open a first party special needs trust. Now, a person does not do this on their own. They need to see a lawyer. It could be a special needs lawyer, an estate planning lawyer, or it could be a trial lawyer that can help them establish the trust. The attorney must draft the first party trust document, and that is then sent to the trust company who will serve as trustee. The money is established into the trust, deposited into the trust, and then the beneficiary, the person living with a disability, can use this money to pay for items or services that are not covered under the government benefits. I'm going to give you another example so you can keep thinking of different people you know or that you're working with that could benefit from a special needs trust. There was a woman that had multiple sclerosis. She became very ill, and her husband ended up divorcing her. In that divorce settlement, alimony was paid. She opened a first party special needs trust for the alimony money to be deposited in so that she could maintain her benefits. Now, let me give you a little scenario that went along with this. They had 2 children. The husband took the children and cared for them because the wife was not able to be as active as she wanted to be in caring for her children. A time came when the husband called the trust company and he asked if the trust company could pay for a trip to Disney World for him and the children because he had helped create the children and he thought the funds from his wife's trust could be used to pay for that trip. Now, what do you think that answer was? Well, it could not pay for that trip. What it could pay for is the mother to go on the trip and she could have a caregiver go with her. So that could be her husband. Both of their expenses could be paid while they're on their trip to Disney World, but the two children's expenses could not be paid for. So let's say they got a room together, all four of them. Only half of the room could be paid for, 2/4 of the room. The rest would have to be paid from personal money that they had. This husband understood after a lengthy conversation that the money in the trust can only be used for the person living with a disability. Now, what about if you win the lottery and you're disabled? Can that money go in a first party trust? Well, it sure can. And in fact, there was a gentleman that won $600,000 in the lottery. His mom bought him a home using that money. And because he was mentally disabled, she said, I know he cannot handle this money on his own. So the money was put into a special needs trust. The gentleman was able to pay for things such as his cell phone, his cable, maintenance on his vehicle, and different things like that. But he asked for $60 a day for lottery tickets because he said he was so lucky to win the lottery the first time that he thought if he kept playing, he would win again, and he wanted to add to his trust. Well, we cannot do that in any type of special needs trust. The money in the trust must be used for items or services to benefit the beneficiary, and cash cannot be given. The pooled trust is much like the first party special needs trust, except for the pooled trust, each person that deposits money into the trust has a sub-account set up. And a portion of the money that's put into each sub-account is invested in a group. This is done so that the beneficiary hopefully can earn a higher rate of return than if they had invested on their own or put their money in a savings account. Now, there is one exception to this. When money is put into a first party trust or a third party supplemental needs trust, the beneficiary and their family can choose their own financial advisor to work with the trust company for the use of financial planner, and they want to continue with that. Usually choice that can be made and work very well. In a pooled trust, the family has no say-so in how the money is invested. It's invested with an outside financial planner that does the best he or she can, to preserve the money and to earn a higher rate of return in dividends. Any dividend earned goes directly into each person's pooled trust. It does not go to the trust company, and the beneficiary is able to use that money. Another characteristic about a pooled special needs trust is someone can be any age to have a pooled trust: children, adults, infants, seniors. But if it is a senior, someone over 65, a pooled trust must be used. They cannot use a first party trust. There is also a Medicaid payback provision on the pooled trust, just as there is on a first party trust. This means that when the beneficiary dies, the state will send a letter to the trustee asking for money to be reimbursed to the state for the expenses that were used by the beneficiary. Depending on how much money remains in the trust, allows the trustee to reimburse the state. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the end of the presentation. So what are some ways you can use money in a trust? And this is for any type of trust. Let me ask you, what do you think the first thing is someone asks for when their trust is opened? It's a 60-inch flat screen TV. You'd be surprised at how many requests our company gets for those 60-inch flat screen TVs. They want them mounted on the wall, and the bigger the better. In fact, the largest TV our trust has ever purchased was a 72-inch TV for a gentleman that had macular degeneration, and he needed the large screen to be able to see. In week 3, we're going to go over much more in detail all of the suggested uses of the trust. But as you can see here on the screen, there are many ways a special needs trust can be used. Now, what happens to the money remaining in the trust after the beneficiary dies? Well, as I said earlier, it depends on the type of the trust. In a third-party supplemental needs trust, there is no Medicaid payback. So when the beneficiary dies, the money will go to whomever is listed. Now, does it have to be a person? No, it does not. It can be an organization. And in fact, there was a person that passed that left 3 adult children as remainder beneficiaries. $40,000 remained in that trust, and it was divided equally among the 4 living children. 3 of the children, and remember these are adults, accepted the $10,000 each that they received. The 4th, who had cared for his mother, decided that the church had helped him so much that he wanted the money to go to his church. So the trustee did write a check to the church in memory of his mother. Now, some people, and this will seem very strange to you, do not like the money that they're getting. And I'll give you an example. There was a woman who had a stepdaughter. They were getting along great. And one day, the mother said, the stepdaughter counted on this money, and over time, they had a terrible argument and they quit speaking to each other. For 12 years, they did not talk. The stepmother had a special needs trust, and when she passed, TennCare was paid back, and there was $16,000 remaining in the trust. The trustee wrote a check to the stepdaughter and mailed it with an explanation. About a week later, the stepdaughter called the office and asked to speak to the executive director. The executive director listened to the woman, and she didn't understand why she was so upset. Because in her own mind, she was thinking, if I received a check for $16,000 in the mail, I think I'd be quite happy. She finally found out about this argument that the stepdaughter had had with her stepmother. The stepdaughter said, while talking to the executive director, that she was promised $20,000 and she only received $16,000 and she wanted the other $4,000. Well, the executive director was kind of taken aback by this, and she explained that that's all the money there was, that the stepmother had tried to follow through, but she had to use that money to live and to pay for her healthcare needs. Finally, the stepdaughter accepted that money grudgingly. Now let's go on. I'm going to give you a scenario and see what you think about this. This is a true story, one that I experienced in my first year of working with Vista Points. That was 13 years ago. I was going out doing presentations, and I ran across this young man. Now, let me tell you, this picture is not of the young man I met, but it's pretty similar. So, this young man had cerebral palsy. His grandfather had quite a few grandchildren, and he promised them all $100,000 each when he died. Well, when he passed, he held true to his word, and each grandchild got $100,000. The lawyer called this young man and told him he was going to receive this money. And the young man said, "Hold up, keep that money there in your escrow account. I've got to figure this out because I have cerebral palsy. I'm in a wheelchair. I have a caregiver that's with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have therapy, I have food stamps, I have my housing. Everything's paid for through government benefits. It totals about $85,000 a year. I know that if I accept this $100,000 from my grandfather, and I know he wanted me to have it, but I'm going to lose my government benefits, and then I'll have to use that $100,000 to live on. In accepting that $100,000 after it's gone, which would be about 14 or 15 months, I'm going to have a waiting period to qualify for my government benefits again. I'll lose my caregiver. I won't have food to eat. I won't have the therapy I need. I won't have my housing. What am I going to do? Well, he talked it over with his caregiver. And remember, this was before I met him. It was, in fact, 2 weeks before I met him. They decided to renounce his inheritance. And this means that the money went back into his grandfather's estate to be divided among the other living grandchildren. 2 weeks later, I was in the facility where he lived. I was giving my presentation about special needs trust, and he interrupted me and told me this story. And he said, "Are you telling me that I could have put this money in a special needs trust, kept my government benefits, and then used the money to pay for items or services that my benefits don't cover?" And I said, "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He asked me to please keep speaking on this subject because people don't know about it. You might hear about special needs trust, but you don't pay close attention until it actually affects you, as it did with this gentleman. Now, in my mind, I make it a happy ending. In my mind, the other grandchildren helped their uh, relative to live a good quality of life. Although they inherited more than the $100,000, they helped this young man. Do you think that was true? I'll never know, but I like happy endings. I want to tell you another story. There was a young man that was working in a grocery store. He was doing great, was very active, lifted weights, had a wonderful life. A gunman came in and robbed him. And in that robbery, he was shot and became paralyzed. Over a 2 to 3 year period, he was able to learn how to use his wheelchair and function quite effectively, but his family couldn't care for him. He was old, they were older, and they just didn't have the strength to lift him out of his wheelchair and transfer him in the restroom and bathe him. So he had to live in a nursing home. This young man was 23 years old. He did not want to be in the nursing home. He wanted to learn how to drive a vehicle using hand controls. He wanted to travel. He wanted to have a girlfriend. He wanted so much in his life. And when he received a settlement due to the shooting, his family helped him to open a special needs trust. When the trust was established, he worked with the staff to lay out a plan of what he wanted to do to make his life better. He ended up using the trust money to purchase a wheelchair accessible van and have hand controls put in it. The trust was used to pay for training for him. He went and did extra physical therapy that the trust paid for above what he was already receiving. He wanted to dress in clothes that a 23-year-old wears, and so the trust was used to purchase those clothes. He had all of the electronic equipment that you could imagine because his arms were able to move and he could use his hands. He could operate a computer. He had an iPod. He had a phone, everything with that trust money. How's he doing now? Well, let me tell you, he is doing fantastic. He has a girlfriend. They travel a little bit. He uses a TrueLink credit card provided by the trust so that when he's out, he can purchase items. Now, there are guidelines on that, but he can purchase items while he is out enjoying his life. Was this, but he's adjusted, and his quality of life, as I said in the beginning, as my quality of life was affected, it doesn't mean it's a bad quality of life, it's just a different quality of life. Now, sometimes there are people living with mental illness that do not want to live in a home. And this is another real example. There was a gentleman in his 40s who had a girlfriend. Something terrible happened, and the gentleman was hurt very severely. From the injury, he became mentally ill, and he did not want to be enclosed in any way. He did not want to live in a house, an apartment, a facility, anything. He wanted to live out under the stars and be free. Well, he received a lawsuit settlement. The money was put into a trust. He did not want his family to help him because he was very paranoid, thinking that they were going to use his money for their own needs instead of his. He did keep a cell phone that the trust paid for, and he would check in every week and say if he was in a tent or if it was cold, sometimes he'd go to a shelter. He didn't like going to the shelter because they would not let him bring his dog inside. So he stayed outside most of the time. Sometimes he would make a friend. And one thing that many times people with mental illness do is they share the information of how much money they have. It's kind of bragging and making them feel good. They want to help other people too, but they're not permitted to when the money is in the trust. Well, every once in a while, this man would make a new friend, and his new friend would call the office and talk to me directly, saying, "Hey, we'll call him Bob. I'm Bob's new friend, and I can take care of him, and you can release that money to me. I'll buy a vehicle for him, and I'll make sure he's cared for and eats and has a place to live." Do you think that happens? No. The money is put into the trust, and it's irrevocable. That means that it cannot be taken out. The money has to remain in the trust to be used by the beneficiary for the items or services that the beneficiary needs. I can tell you that this gentleman lived a good quality of life. It might not be the quality of life that we expect or would think was normal, but for him, it was a good quality of life. Now, closing thoughts. Each type of special needs trust works for a certain person. Not everybody needs a special needs trust. The person has to be living with a disability or special needs. And remember, that needs to be physical, mental, or intellectual. And in a first party and third party trust, a private financial planner or advisor can be used along with working with the trust company so that a higher rate of return can be earned on that. In a pooled trust, the money is invested in a group together, and that's why it's called pooled, to try to earn higher dividends. And then those dividends are applied to each type of trust. Special needs trusts do give the beneficiary a good quality of life, and they also provide the family with peace of mind knowing their loved ones being cared for. Now that ends my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them at this time.
Darlene, fantastic presentation. if you have any questions, please press the hand button at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and unmute all the panelists. So let's go S to unmute, S to unmute, S to unmute. So the first question we have that was emailed into us is, if I decide that my special needs child needs a special needs trust, what is my first step, or where do I go from here?
Great question. The first step is to call the trust company. And you can speak to one of the people at our trust company, and we will provide you with information on attorneys in your area. It could be a state law attorney, elder law attorney, special needs attorney, family law attorney. It just depends on the situation. We usually give the caller 2 attorneys or 3 to call in their area so they can compare. And we tell them to ask lots of questions. We give them an idea of what they need to do to prepare for the initial consultation with the attorney, and they can call back anytime. In fact, many times the attorney and the family will do a conference call with someone from the trust office to answer any questions while they're all together. So the first step is to call the trustee or the trust office and find an attorney in their area that they can meet with.
Nice. It looks like we got a hand raise from Susan Bartlett. I'm going to allow you to talk now.
Okay.
Susan?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you, Susan.
Thank you. So, Darlene, how do I determine which of the 3 different types of special needs trust is the right one to use?
Well, that's why you call. I am not an attorney. I'm the executive director of Vista Points and have been there 13 years, but I will listen to your story if it's for you or for a loved one, and then I will refer you to an attorney. When I refer you to the 1 or 2 attorneys, I email those attorneys and give them a little background of what we've talked about and let them know that you'll be calling. So it depends. Let's say that you have a child with special needs. You'll probably want to set up a third-party supplemental needs trust and put money in there for the child's benefit. They can use that money now or in the future. If you get a lawsuit settlement or you're in the process of receiving a lawsuit settlement and you're under 65, maybe a first-party trust is the best. Now, there are people that have children that set up a pooled trust. They want to not have to worry about any of the financial matters or investing the money. They want the trustee to handle that. Or if it's a person that is 65 or older, they will need to use a pooled trust. And if you don't mind, I'd like to tell a quick story. We had a lady that was 90, I believe. She inherited money. It was put into a trust and our trust company managed it. When a trust is first set up, we like to meet with the beneficiary and see what their needs are and what their desires are. Well, this woman said that she wanted to keep the money and not use it right now. So every 6 months, we would give her a call and check on her, see what she was needing. We also had a case manager working with her to make sure that all of her needs were met and she was living a good quality of life. Well, a year went by and she had not used a penny of her trust money. And we tried to encourage her, hey, maybe you'd like a new bedspread. Maybe you'd like a radio. Maybe you'd like to get your hair done weekly or have flowers delivered. And she would just say no. 2 years went by, and finally I got her to tell me why she would not use any of that money. Now she was 92, I believe. She told me she was saving it for her old age. And I just burst out laughing. And she laughed too. And I said, please, please do something for yourself. She was very happy, lived a good quality of life. She did start getting flowers delivered to her room, and that made her even happier. So thank you, Susan, for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. The next question we got emailed in Can you have multiple types of trusts?
Yes, great question. You can have multiple types of trusts. So someone could be getting gifts given to them, and that could be in a third-party trust. They could have a lawsuit settlement, and that money would go into a first-party or pooled trust. And then there's something called the ABLE account, which is like a private savings account for the person living with a disability. So in fact, someone could have three types of not trust, two types of trust and the ABLE account as a financial means.
Nice. Do all trust companies offer all three types of special needs trust?
That's another good question. And in fact, no. To have a pooled special needs trust, the organization needs to be a nonprofit organization, and Vista Points is. It's been in existence for 20 years. Many trust companies operate on first party and third party trusts, but do not have the pooled trust. So, no, not all of them operate the same.
How do I set up a special needs trust for my special needs child? Do I utilize an attorney?
You definitely utilize an attorney. You can call our company and we'll refer you to an attorney that is in your area and suit your needs. We'll give you questions. Now, I do want to tell you, attorneys charge different prices. So some attorneys will give you a short amount of time, such as 30 minutes, an initial consultation for free. Others start charging you usually around $250 an hour to meet with them. So when you call the attorney to set up the initial consultation, we tell you to ask how much that fee is going to be for walking through the door.
Oh, okay. So we got another question from the attendees. We got a second time, long time. We're going to go to Susan Bartlett again. I'm unmuting you now.
Thank y'all for answering all of my questions. I actually have a question for Carolyn. Carolyn, can you put stocks and bonds into a special needs trust?
Thank you, Susan. That's a great question. And yes, we're going to be going into, in 2 weeks, how to fund all these different trusts and what you can put in there, because it all depends on, I don't want to answer right away because it really depends on the whole picture, what other assets you have, what your goal is in terms of what you're going to be using, what your risk tolerance is. Do you need income right away? Is this more for maybe 5-7 years down the road because you set up a special needs trust because you've just gotten the diagnosis? So I can't give you an exact question or answer because it really, I need to look at the whole picture. But yes, you can put stocks and bonds into it. And then the next question is, it all depends on your goals and where you want that money to come from, pull out of, and what your needs are. So thank you, Susan, for that question.
Thank you, Susan. And remember, if anybody else that's attendee wants to raise their hand and ask a question, feel free to do so. What does it cost to set up a special needs trust?
There is a fee related to the establishment of a special needs trust, and that fee is based on how much money is being deposited into the trust. So let's say someone is inheriting $100,000. That money will go into the trust, and there's a fee schedule that states how much money. You can look on the Vista Points website. Our website is www.vistapoints.org, and you can see the fees for the trust. There are other fees associated with the trust, but in the first year that it is established, that's the only fee that will be paid. Upon the anniversary date of the trust being open, there is an annual fee, and there's also a K-1 tax preparation fee that is paid each year. Every trust pays that. That's required by law.
Okay. What types of special needs trust scenarios would determine what type of special needs trust to be used?
Well, I think I've given quite a few examples, but I'll try to give a couple more. Let's talk about a third party special needs trust. There was a man who had an adult daughter. She married a young man. They got involved in drugs. During that time, they had 2 children. One of their daughters had special needs. The gentleman's daughter and son-in-law ended up going to prison, and he received custody of the 14-year-old daughter with special needs. He was in his late 80s. They were getting along great, but he knew he needed to prepare so that this grandchild could have a good quality of life. He met with an attorney, and in his will, he had the inheritance go into a third-party supplemental needs trust for this grandchild, and she was well taken care of. She did end up staying at a facility. There's some great facilities for young people. It's like they're in college for the rest of their life. They do so many activities, but her life is wonderful and she's very happy there. But he did take those steps so that she could have that good quality of life. For adults, it depends on if they have money of their own, if they're receiving a lawsuit, but a first party trust usually is what they choose. And in this trust, they're able to work with a financial advisor of their choice if they want, that will work with the trustee to manage money. So as the question was asked earlier, with investments, the investments have to have a name change to the trust, because when someone's trying to qualify for government benefits, they're only allowed to have up to $2,000 in their name. So anything over that needs to be put in the name of the trust. They're still able to use that money or leave it invested, but the name will change to the trust name. And with the pooled trust, many people choose that type of trust so they don't have to worry about making sure that they're following all the rules related to special needs trust, because something could be purchased or a service could be used that could reduce the beneficiary's benefits or possibly have them removed in total. So by using a professional trustee and professional advisors, this person can keep their benefits, have the supplemental needs taken care of through the money they have in the trust, and live a good quality life.
Nice. And it looks like we got one more question from attendees, and this will be the last question of the night. We got a third time, long time. I'm going to unmute you right now. Susan?
I clearly had too much coffee this morning. So the question is, when should I bring in a financial advisor? This is for Carolyn, I believe. And how can I find a financial advisor?
Well, thank you, Susan. I'm a coffee addict too, so I'm right on your same adrenaline path. Great question. I've talked about my last seminar last week. It is so important to create a team. You got to find the right team of people that you connect with, that you find the right personal connections with, that you trust, you're loyal to, they're loyal to you. Whether it's the attorney, the special needs trust, the accountant, it is a team to get you through this part of life. So I always say it's never too early. Timing is so important in terms of whether it's setting up a special needs trust or also finding a financial advisor. I think Darlene talked about, or maybe Teresa last week, the 5-year look back to. I think we'll talk about maybe that more next week, but it's never too early to start getting your ducks in a row. And that includes a financial advisor. And I always say, I love talking to people and telling them about my background and what I've done, and making sure it's the right fit. Everybody has a different experience. And so you can find that right fit. And that is so important, because when you find your group, your people, you are opening yourself up to them, and you are trusting them with your decisions, your advice, and stuff like that going forward. We don't charge, my firm does not charge for financial advice off the bat. If we can help you create a plan, and we can put you into some products that we can help fund your special need product trusts, that's how we get compensated. But we don't charge for our day-to-day advice. That's one of the things I'm very adamant about, because special needs trust is dear to my heart because of my mother's situation. I wish she had done one, and I talked about it last week. So again, never too early in terms of finding a financial advisor. And for all you out there listening, I'd be happy to talk to you. And if I'm not the right fit, that is fine. Again, it's finding that right connection and that personal connection to trust, your personal finances, your emotions, your legal status with them. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. And so that concludes tonight's webinar. Teresa and Bill, would you like to talk about what y'all are planning on talking about next week?
Tyler, I'm going to tell you that we're excited to talk about the things that a trust can pay for. There's some few things that we'll find that we hope people might not know about. We'll take just a brief part of that time to discuss things that it cannot pay for, because we want people to know kind of both sides of that boat as we prepare for week 4, which is let's put it all together, wrap it up, and have a good plan with our trust, our financial advisor, our attorneys, our tribe. We need a good tribe, and that's what we're going to get ready for.
Well, I want to say thank y'all for attending, and go Titans. See y'all next week.